It's making the time to look after ourselves better as leaders around alcohol, food, and exercise. And if we can get that right, our energy shifts, which then helps us to be far better focused and prioritize better. Hi everyone, Rob here, and welcome back to another episode. Hopefully you've had a cracker of a week. Welcome back, Dan. How's things?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Rob. Had a great week. It's been awesome. So yeah, looking forward to getting into another episode.
Good stuff. Well, this is part 2 in our series around breaking through the time management myth. And for our listeners, if you haven't gone back and listened to the first episode in this series, please make sure you do go back and watch and listen to that. Because it's your ability to be able to get in there and because today is really a continuation on from that. So in our last episode, we spoke a lot around the debunking around the whole time management myth, and we spoke about a few key principles around what you can stop to do and what you can start to do around really changing your relationship with time. But today, it's all about taking this conversation to another level, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, it should be great, Rob. I've got a question for you before we even start. My question for you is, if you had an option to upgrade your ability to better manage time or your ability to make better decisions, which would you choose?
Good one. I like it. I think if you had to ask me a number of years ago, I would have asked for the ability to have more time, so to manage time better. But I think these days my answer is completely different, and that's because over the last number of years, as I've developed into a real leadership role within this business, and I've grown and expanded my world, and also had pressures with the introduction of having kids and all those types of things, life's become more complex. I would say that it's all about better decisions. And the reason for that is because one of my greatest lessons that I've learned is that every time you want to grow and expand, something's got to give so that you can get. And so every time you want to be able to take a step forward, every time you want to be able to grow and expand, something's got to give in order for that to get. And if you want more time, you're always going to be trying to stack more on your plate and it's in the search for more time, and you'll never actually achieve it in the pursuit of that. And so for me, it's absolutely better decision making and being more strategic in the time that you've got. And I think that's the key to moving forward and enabling progression, is having that mindset of what's got to give so I can get. It's that whole leverage mindset and being a hell of a lot more strategic and making far better decisions in the time that we've got.
Yeah, I like it. I think so too. I think there's that idea if you're choosing that first one, and if you're playing along with us as we ask these questions, you're really setting yourself up by going down the time management path of being a slave to time all the time and forever, if you want the exclamation point on that. But I think, yeah, the key to mastering your priorities and the reason why we talk about this sort of stuff so often is because we want people to be able to master priorities, and really the key to doing that is by making better decisions. It's not going to come through some magical ability to control time. So if you're going to try and control time, it's going to come out of being something that you can't control, and trying to control the uncontrollables, a bit of a waste of time.
And love him or hate him, Scotty Cam on an ad many years ago was get in, get on with it, get it done, and get the hell out of there. That was one of his quotes on one of the ads around a trade supply business here in Victoria anyway. And I really like that, because if you're always in search for more time, well, where does it stop? You just become sloppy. You just fill your whole days with low value tasks. And if you want to be able to manage time or get more time, well, where does it stop? Do you get to 30-hour days, 35, 38, 40, 50? Like where does it stop? There is no stop to that. But I think if you know that time is precious, and even though we've got an abundance of time, time is still limited. by making far better decisions in the time that we've got, what it actually does is it forces us to get in, get on with it, get it done, and get on to the next thing, which is actually really important to us. So what it does is sharpen us up to some degree to make us be really clear on who we are and what we want, and making sure that we're making far better decisions which are truly aligned with the priorities of what we say is important to us. And so for me, um, I like to consider that it's actually not time management, it's decision management. That's the key around today's episode, that we want to talk a bit about decision management. And today's episode, we're actually going to focus on three key things, which is around making far better decisions around priorities, making far better decisions around your focus, and making far better decisions around your energy. So priorities, focus, and energy. And if we can really unpack them for our listeners today, I think if as leaders and business owners, if we've got the ability to make far better decisions, then what it helps us do is eliminate the excuse of not enough time. So let's get into it. Key decision number one, all around prioritization. And what I really love around this is it's so important that in order for us to be able to be less reactive and more proactive, it all starts with having a really good plan. And in business, it comes back to that age old saying: if you plan to fail, you fail to plan. And um, uh, and I think really, when you don't have a plan, our plan ultimately drives our priorities, and our priorities drive what we do in the time that we've got. I know that when we in coaching, when we meet a business owner who is trapped working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, confused around what to do next, it's because they don't have a plan to progress. They don't have a plan to be able to move forward. And as a result, they get stuck down in the low value task, keeping busy for busyness sake. They want to move forward, but they don't actually have a plan to be able to progress, do they?
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the most often asked questions in our coaching. Every single week, we're forever talking to clients and asking the question around, well, what's your outcome? And knowing what your plan is. Another way of asking that is, what's your plan? Like, what are you planning on doing? If we understand that, then we can start to make some decisions. If we don't know what we're going after, or we don't know what the plan is, how do we get to this point where we can prioritize what's going on? So being able to pull all that together is just, I mean, that's step one. Have a plan, like have an outcome in mind before you start. Otherwise, you're just wandering around aimlessly, and anywhere will do. So that's really step one.
Yeah, correct. And I think in business, especially when you're growing a business in the early stages of business, you're absolutely wearing all the hats. And so you've got conflicting priorities, because as you're getting a business out of the ground, you are the tradesman, you are the admin, you are the bookkeeper, you are the project manager, you are the estimator, you are the sales guy. Um, Not to mention, got to try and find a little bit of time in there for yourself, and try and be a good partner, husband, and dad at the same time. And so when you are in the earlier stages of business, you are absolutely wearing all the hats, and you're doing a lot of the doing. And so when you're in that phase, as you're trying to get this business out of the ground, um, there's a lot of things that you've got to get done. And so the reason why businesses then plateau and don't feel like they're progressing or moving forward, and then find themselves in time constraints, is because the owner is more often than not caught on all the low value activities, and there's no progression, because then they're not prioritizing the things which is going to get themselves and the business to the next level. And so it's not that you've got to stop doing those things. It's this: those things have to get done for the business to keep turning over and keep moving forward. It's just that maybe you, as the business owner, you've got to stop doing those things and delegate a few of those things out of your plate, and which makes way for you to be able to prioritize maybe just one or two key things which are just going to help them move forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think people go down the path and they start to think, how can I get more done? And when it comes to priorities, it's almost like you've got to reverse that. It's almost counterintuitive. You've got to go, well, how do I get better results from doing less? But everyone chases this. If only I could get more done, which comes out of our what we talked about previously in terms of their relationship to time and just wanting more of it, to wanting to get more done, which is how you answered that question at the start of the show. So I think having this idea of how do I actually, I've got to try and get, I'm going to have to get less done because I can't fit it all in or whatever it is. So I've got to learn to prioritize. And if we do it that way, then all of a sudden we're starting to get what we call distinctions around, well, what's most important. Because at the early stages of going into business and wearing all those hats, and this is the problem, is that everything seems important. It's how do I choose which one to do, which is why we're talking about decisions being the big thing and priorities being the very first key to this. Because if everything's important, there's that old saying, and really take the time to hear it if you're listening in now, if it's for the first time. But think about, if everything's important, then nothing can be important, because importance means that it stands out above the rest. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the thing that stands out, because that leads us into what we need to do. So if everything's important, nothing is important, is a really key piece in terms of getting to priorities.
Yeah, no, I love saying it to clients is that it's that saying that says, you're going to hear me say a lot of sayings too, by the way, over all these episodes. I've got sayings for days, but I'm going to say they're all my favorite. They actually are all my favorite. But one of my favorites is that the lion's share of your results comes down to the 1 to 2 key strategic plays that you're working on at the right time. And what that really means to me is, when you're growing a business, it's not about working on 1,000,001 key strategic plays at once, because that's what you're saying is that otherwise you've got all these half-baked strategies you're working on and you never see them through to completion or get the outcome. And so to be able to make a business grow and expand and progress and keep moving forward, it's your ability to be able to work on the 1 to 2 key strategic plays, make them really important, and see the importance of those ones, to be able to go, well, if I do this, I'll get that. If I do this, I'll get that. And it's the ability to be able to recognize that if I just make them important and prioritize those couple of key strategic plays in my world, that's what's going to help me move forward. But it's not about doing 1,000,001 things. It's about still doing all the doing as you're growing the business, but it's about focusing on less and doing more of that stuff, which helps move the needle, isn't it?
It is. And that's why we introduced in the last episode that concept of LVTs, low value tasks versus high value tasks, HVTs. Because if you've got that, then you've got some separation. You're starting to distinguish between, or follow through on that idea that, well, not everything can be important. Not everything is high value. Not everything is low value. So when we get that separation and distinction, you're automatically chopping that list down, which makes it a whole lot easier to get to what we're talking about in point number 2, is then, how do I determine my focus?
Yeah. And with that, and what I really love around that low value task versus high value task, the best way that the listeners can do that is to really get in there and track their week. And I know it sounds really simple, and it's a simple strategy, and no doubt we'll do absolutely another episode on it. But one of the key activities around this is it's like when you want to lose weight for the first time. One of the first things your PTs will ask you to do is track what goes in your mouth, because if you're consuming more calories than you're expending, you're going to be putting on weight. If you go into a calorie deficit, and then you're going to lose weight. So the way that you do that is to track. You track what you do so you know what to make changes. Same thing in business. If you track your time in terms of where you're actually spending your time, what that's going to be able to help you do is identify what are the low value tasks and what are the high value tasks that you're currently getting done. And I can guarantee, whenever we do this with clients, which we do across the board with all our programs, there is always 10 to 15 to 20 hours a week of low value tasks with every client, whether it's picking up deliveries, even being on the tools, doing admin work, doing bookkeeping work. It's all those low value tasks that a lot of people, business owners, are getting bogged down in, because they've got that mindset is, no one's as good as me. It saves me time, energy, money, and it saves me money if I do it myself. It's that mindset that gets them bogged down into those low value tasks. But it's the identification of that which enables you then to be able to go, well, do I got to stop doing it, or do I need to delegate it to someone else, which then makes way for higher value tasks. And then when you start to prioritize that, that's what creates progression. And so for the listeners, that's one of the most simplest ways that they can get in there to be able to really help them identify what are they currently prioritizing, and then classify what is a low value task versus a high value task. And that's one of the simplest ways to be able to keep moving forward. Now that we've got priorities and we can identify what is a priority and what isn't, then we can start prioritizing those things in our week. Now, the next layer to that is around making far better decisions around how we focus during the time that we got. We can control how we focus, and we can make far better decisions around what we focus on. So, plan drives our priorities, priorities then drive our focus. And what I really love around your ability to focus is it's that thing where you've got to be able to hone in on what's actually really important in that moment at the expense of other things that are creating noise around you.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect lead, and this is sort of a topic we get into all the time dealing with trades and construction guys, because what's important is very different to what's urgent. And when we talk about those two things, we rub up against guys all the time that are dealing with getting caught up on urgent stuff rather than doing that honing in on what's important. So if you can start to separate those two things now, that helps you to develop your sense of focus. Because what most people will focus on, either incorrectly or without knowing it, just through habit or what they've been doing in the past, is they'll focus in on what's urgent and they'll let go of the priorities that they've just spent so long working on. So they'll have a plan, tick, done, absolutely clear on what I want. Cool, I've got my priorities. I know what's important. And then they get out of that mode and they get into the busyness of a day or a week or a moment. And all of a sudden, we add this thing called urgency and we lose our focus. So the ability to stay on that focus is one of the next critical steps, which is why it's point two in our little structure that we're running through in this episode.
Yeah, and I think if you think about what are the things that are urgent, it's the phone calls back to the customers, getting the job done, making sure there's materials on site. It's the scheduling. It's your team ringing you. Like I'm sure our listeners have been in that point where they get 60, 70, 80, 100 calls a day. And all those things are urgent. But if our listeners are really honest with themselves, very few of those things are actually important. And that's the trap. And if you think around the world around us, everything is demanding our focus. Social media, friends, family. You think about your inbox. What is that? Someone else's agenda to drop it in your inbox to get things done. So instant messages, social media, inbox. Our focus is being pulled from pillar to post, and we're trying to be all things to all people, and we don't get anything done. And especially when you're trying to grow a business, when you've got a team of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, the bigger that your team gets, you got to remember that there's more mouths, more ears, and more opinions that are demanding your time. And so as a business owner, learning how to manage your own and make far better decisions around your own focus is the key to your success moving forward. Because if you can't do it when you've got a small business, good luck trying to grow a bigger business.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, the idea around what you just said there, using that word attention, let's be a bit clear on that too. Attention and focus in this context are two different things. And I think the power of being able to, as you were talking, thinking around it, people will demand your attention. The things that we carry around in our pockets all the time now, our smartphones, they're just attention demanding devices. So we've got to start to make this little separation as well in this topic, because if we think of attention as being a demand for our attention, the counterbalance to that, the thing that's in our control, we can't necessarily control who or what's demanding our attention, but what we have to do is develop our power to focus. So our focus is the antidote to all these demands for attention that are hitting us. So it's a real skill that needs to be developed and be clear about focus being different to attention and one helping offset the other.
Yeah, because when you know what's important, it just comes down to discipline. That's what it comes down to. Now, it's not saying that the customer's not important or your team aren't important or getting the invoices or the quotes and all those types of things aren't important. That's not what we're saying. Those things are absolutely important, but it's your ability to be able to compartmentalize your days and be super intentional around what you're doing to be able to get things done. Like if you're in that phase where you're still on the tools a lot of the week, then naturally you're going to be you're going to be spending your nights and weekends doing the things doing all the paperwork, doing the admin and quoting and invoicing, all those types of things. But you've got to make a decision at some point in time. Well, how do I start creating one office day and two office days and three office days? And that requires you to build team to leverage time. So building out a team is essential to your growth. But what it requires you to be able to do is that if you know that that's your plan to be able to go down that path, you've got to be super intentional around the time that you've got. And when we meet business owners who are working crazy hours, it's because they lack the ability to be able to have the discipline to focus on the things that matter. They're they're multitasking. They're trying to do a quote. They're on the phone. They're responding to this. They've got all these half-baked things that they're working on, and they just lack the discipline to be able to focus on the things that matter. And so as leaders, it's our job to be able to create discipline and make far better decisions around our focus on what we put our time and energy into, because when we can master that, that's when we get the important things done as well as the urgent things around it.
Yeah, and when you start thinking about all those tasks you rattled off, they're usually low value tasks. They're LVTs in the grand scheme of things, not HVTs. So every time you think about this, and it might sound like we're doubling up, we're not. We're just getting clearer and going a little bit deeper in the same thought. So really important. I know you've got, when you talk about focus, Rob, there's a thing you love to say to the guys and coach them on.
Yeah,
Give it to them. Come on, I know you love this one too.
I do. I do love this one. To me, focus is an acronym for follow one course until successful. Focused, follow one course until successful. And I love it because what it does is it helps you just hone in on what's really important, and you identify what the priority is. You focus on that priority and you see it through, then you move on to the next thing. And that's what creates progressions, because your ability to follow the course, get the outcome, move on to the next thing. Linking back to your conversation you made there a little bit about low value tasks, a low value task is doing admin work, like pulling together job packs and drafting invoices and working on stuff with your apprentices and all those types of things. A high value task is hiring an admin person. A low value task is a $30 to $35 an hour job, which can be done by someone else. And so I think the more that our listeners can trim those low value tasks off their plate, what it enables them to do is take hats off and share the responsibility, which almost helps them focus even more, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And what happens with LVTs is they usually attach or they bind to urgency.
Yeah.
They bind to the urgent, right? So low value tasks have a tendency to do that. High value tasks tend to take you into the important phase.
And high value tasks often have zero urgency attached to it. And that's where, as leaders, we've got to create our own urgency and our own focus and be far better, making far better decisions around getting those things done. Because when you see a business that's plateaued for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, is because that business owner is caught on the hamster wheel of going round and round and round in circles, because they're not prioritizing and focusing on the things that's actually going to move their business and life forward. And
Yeah.
so all these symptoms that these business owners feel around, why am I not getting to the next level? Why is it I'm trapped working crazy hours? Why is it that I'm disconnected from my family? Why am I not progressing? It's because fundamentally they're working on low value tasks and they're trying to manage time. When the antidote to that, or the solution for that, is let's get to the point where something's got to give so you can get. Let's delegate low value tasks and replace them with high value tasks. And let's get far better at making decisions around our priorities and focus rather than trying to manage time.
I love it.
Point number three for me is energy management and making decisions around energy management. And this is a big one. And I know you love this. This is almost one of your favorite topics, isn't it?
It is. I think it's so much is tied up into this, and it's really a decision you have to make, right? You have to decide, am I going to prioritize my energy? And am I going to prioritize management of my own energy? Or am I going to let the outside world do it for me? Or am I just going to try and wing it and just see if what shows up on the day is going to be good enough? So when we talk about energy in this sense, it is your health and your well-being. And it is where you spend that energy in terms of the time or your allocation of energy towards doing certain tasks, which is what we've sort of been talking about in terms of LVTs, HVTs, and the priorities. But it really is a decision point on its own. Because if you think about it, when you're looking at energy, when you lack energy and you haven't got energy, you show up differently. Your capacity and your capability to do what's important is so reduced. So you think about it, you lack energy. Are you going to make good decisions or poor decisions? Are you going to let everything else do it because you haven't got the energy to keep going on what's important? So you'll just let what's urgent creep in and you'll just react to things. So really, when you lack energy, you're going to make worse decisions. Same thing. If our decisions get hampered, then, well, what happens to our focus? If you haven't got the energy that you need to get through a day, then your focus is going to be nowhere. Your ability to focus for either long periods or do what Cal Newport calls it deep work. If you can't do deep work, HVTs, high value tasks, what's important, then you're not going to get very far, which is what we just talked about. But if you haven't got the energy to do that, you're going to lack the ability to focus. So you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you don't start to manage and prioritize and make some important decisions around your energy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I know that there's been times where I've been just tired, stressed, worn out, and absolutely busted. And and something that should take an hour, you're just so unproductive, and it takes 4 hours. And instead of having the laser sharp focus in our minds, we lack that focus, and our minds drift off to checking messages, going onto social media. We feel lethargic. We're tired. So instead of something getting done, getting in, getting on with it, getting done, and getting out of there, we often find ourselves spending way more time than we need to because we haven't managed ourselves well and our energy and how we show up. And so, as leaders, the way that we show up and the way that we manage ourselves is actually one of the most important things that we can do. Because in leadership, um, the fish rots from the head down. It all starts and stops with you as a leader. Who you are and the way you show up in your organization, it permeates through the business, and it permeates through your team. You set the standards, you set the expectations, and if you're tired and worn out and feeling busted and couldn't be fucked, then guess what? That's going to be the culture that goes through your business. And compared to someone who's up and about, they get up, they've got great habits, they minimize their alcohol intake, they eat good food, they fuel themselves, they train, they'll look after themselves. That leader shows up completely different for someone who's got no energy. And Dan, we see it all the time, don't we? Where someone who just does not look after themselves, it's like the business makes them feel trapped. The trapped feeling creates unhealthy habits, and then it becomes a very big vicious cycle, doesn't it?
It does. And everything takes more effort.
Yeah.
So when you haven't got the energy, it takes more effort. And I like to think of it as energy. Energy is really like the birthplace of consistency. If you're trying to consistently and sustainably grow your business, or you're trying to consistently achieve results, guaranteed the biggest pillar that's going to kick that out from underneath you and sabotage your efforts is going to be your energy. So unless you learn to manage that and choose to make it a priority, you're always going to be susceptible to big dips and big highs and valleys, because you're just going to have moments where the energy's high, you're going to redline until you can't do it anymore. Then you're just going to fall off a cliff until you rebuild. So managing your energy as you go is really that birthplace of consistency.
I like that. I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one.
You like that? No, I just ripped that out then. It actually hit me as you were talking. I was pretty happy with it myself, but it's true.
I like it. And isn't it interesting that when you talk to a lot of business owners, the first thing they'll say is, well, when I get more time, I'll start looking after myself better. When I get more, I'll do this. When I get X, I'll do Y. So when I get more time, I'll start eating better. When I get more time, I'll spend more time with my family. When I get more time, I'll grow my business. When I get more time, I'll do X. And so what happens is when they've got that unhealthy relationship with time and they're trying to manage it, what happens is their time in the business blows out, because they're trying to be all things to all people, the yes man, like we spoke about in the previous episode. Then they become tired, stressed, worn out. That's when alcohol, poor food choices, and lack of exercise creeps in. Then that creates this cycle. So when we're working with business owners in the very first instance, one of the first things that we look at is their own personal habits around themselves and the way that they're managing themselves and the way that they're managing their energy. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive, and it might sound counterintuitive to a lot of our listeners. It's just that instead of scrolling for multiple hours on their phone to numb themselves because of all the tired and stress, maybe replace that with far better decisions around food and exercise. And so if someone's working really big hours and they're tired and stressed, it's counterintuitive to think, well, let's make change before I do this. But the reality is you've got to get in there. It's not about finding time. It's making the time to look after ourselves better as leaders around alcohol, food, and exercise. And if we can get that right, our energy shifts, which then helps us to be far better focused and prioritize better. It's counterintuitive, but it's not about finding time. It's about making time. And that's the secret.
I'm going to pick you up on that, Rob. It's not even about making time. It's deciding.
Deciding.
It's making a decision to prioritize it. That's how it works. And I think this guy's a really good thing. Like you just heard Rob say it right then. I'll make the time. It's such an ingrained habit for all of us. We all do it. It's not like Rob and I are sitting here as the gurus of this sort of stuff. We do it too, but we've got to catch ourselves out on it. We've got to start to build a different frame in our mind. So when those patterns hit, we've got to call it out. So yeah, it's about deciding to make this a priority. The minute you do that, then the world shifts. If you keep talking about it, making it as making time, it's just going to be one of those things that hangs around and it's another thing to do.
So true. And so I think the essence around today's episode is we're going to start shifting the conversation away from time management and start having a conversation and start making this conversation around far better decision management. And the way that we can do that is make better decisions in 3 key areas. The first key area is around your priorities. The second key area is around making far better decisions around your focus. And then the third key area is making far better decisions around your energy management. And if we can, as leaders in our businesses, regardless if you're doing $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, doesn't matter the size of your business. If you can make far better decisions around those 3 key areas, then what that's going to do is unlock a world of growth and expansion, not only for you personally, but it's going to unlock this massive opportunity in your business to be able to move forward. And what we're doing is debunking this whole conversation around our ability to control the uncontrollable, which is time. And it's starting to put the power back into our hands, which is our ability to take control on things that we can manage, which is our own personal decisions and the way that we show up. And so for our listeners, just remember, time management is a myth. It's your ability to make far better decisions, which is the key to your success. Dan, anything you want to be able to hit home to our listeners today?
I'm going to give them a little exercise. And I think the little exercise I'd say to you guys is just spend a couple of minutes and think about those LVTs and HVTs as a spectrum. And the higher the value task, as we said, Rob was talking about, the higher the value, the more important it is. The lower the value of the task, the less important or the more urgent it becomes. So just spend a couple of minutes and think where on that spectrum from LVTs and the absolute urgency to the HVTs and absolute importance, where you spend most of your time, because that's going to give you a really good starting point to make some better decisions.
If you got a lot of value out of today's episode, please share this with your mates and colleagues in the industry, because I know that this topic is a game changer for a lot of business owners out there who are feeling trapped and confused around what to do next. And when someone starts to change their relationship with time and put the control back into their own world by making far better decisions, then that's what changes their life. And so if you know someone in the industry who's really struggling at the moment and is working crazy hours, let's start introducing this concept and let's start changing the narrative in the industry around time management, and let's start unlocking this conversation more around far better decision management. Looking forward to being in your ears again for our up and coming episodes, and continuing these conversations around this, so that you can all show up as better leaders and build better businesses and live more fulfilling family lives. Talk to you in the next episode.
Catch you soon.